Good evening, dear listeners, and a very warm welcome to you all. Wherever you are tuning in from tonight, maybe cozied up in bed, listening from your favourite quiet corner at home, or perhaps relaxing somewhere peaceful with the world fading away outside. I'm so glad you've joined me here. Take a slow, deep breath. Let your shoulders drop. Maybe pull the covers up a bit higher and feel the day gently slip away. Let the story begin. The Sinclair Mansion Ballroom in Mayfair was the perfect stage for tragedy. Elegant, refined, every guest playing their role beneath crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes. Then Lady Violet Harrington was found dead in the private salon, her champagne glass still in her gloved hand, lips faintly blue from cyanide. Police saw a tragic suicide by a lonely widow seeking attention at her niece's debutante ball. But Hercule Poirot saw a performance. Someone in this theatre of wealth was playing a role. The role of innocent, the role of murderer. The curtain rises. Chapter 1. The stage is set. The grand ballroom of Sinclair Mansion shimmered under a constellation of crystal chandeliers on the night of June 15th, 1937. Polished mahogany floors caught every flicker of light, while hothouse roses and white lilies breathed their heavy perfume into the warm air. The faint crackle of the drawing-room fire mingled with the distant pop of champagne corks and the soft rustle of silk evening gowns. Lady Violet Harrington, the evening's most glittering patroness, had worn midnight blue silk and moved through the crowd with the assurance of an actress who knew every cue. Shortly after midnight, a footman discovered her slumped in the small private salon that opened off the ballroom. The heavy door had closed softly behind her only minutes earlier. Her body was discovered still warm, one kid-gloved hand loosely curled around an empty champagne flute. A faint almond scent clung to the glass. Inspector Japp arrived first, his rough tweed coat brushing velvet curtains as he surveyed the scene. "Suicide, most likely," he told the footman waiting outside. "Money troubles, family strain, the usual society sorrows." Yet when Hercule Poirot stepped from his taxi into the chill Mayfair night air, he merely tilted his egg-shaped head and adjusted an imaginary wrinkle from the sleeve of his impeccable dinner jacket. He had not been invited as guest but summoned as director, and already his green eyes gleamed with quiet satisfaction. "Observe, mon ami, this suspect plays their role too perfectly." The cast had gathered in the long drawing-room. Lady Clarissa Sinclair, mother of the debutante, dabbed at apparently dry eyes with a crisp linen napkin. Lord Edmund Sinclair paced before the fire, cigar smoke curling from between his fingers. Miss Arabella Sinclair, radiant in ivory silk, trembled against her fiancé's arm. Mr. Julian Fairfax poured brandy with steady hands, sandalwood cologne drifting forward. Miss Penelope Langley hovered near the velvet curtains in rough tweed evening jacket, while Dr. Sebastian Hart consulted his pocket watch with professional calm. "You watch with Poirot, no? You see how Lady Clarissa's shoulders shake appropriately, yet her mascara remains flawless. Watch this performance carefully. Is it truth or theatre?" Mr. Fairfax refilled glasses for the ladies, helpful to a fault, yet the icy bottle of champagne still stood on the sideboard beside the dead woman's glass. Only one flute carried the bitter trace. Poirot arranged 3 crystal tumblers symmetrically on a low table before speaking. "The crime scene. It is a stage, Inspector Japp. Every actor here has already taken position." He made an expressive gesture with small, precise hands. Lady Violet drank champagne laced with cyanide. the bottle remains cold, yet the poison touched only one glass. Someone directed that glass to her alone. The performance? Lady Clarissa weeps, yes. The handkerchief dabs at the eyes. The shoulders, they shake appropriately. The tell, but observe, the handkerchief remains dry. The mascara does not run. The performance of grief, it is technically perfect. Too perfect. The psychology. I am reminded of the Ackroyd affair, where a man performed shock so convincingly that even I, Hercule Poirot, was momentarily deceived. He rehearsed in mirrors, practiced the widening of eyes, the sudden intake of breath. Yet he reached for his cigarette case with a hand far too steady. A man truly shocked does not possess such composure. The body betrays what the face rehearses. This is what the little grey cells understand. The psychology beneath the performance. The truth. Therefore, this woman knew of the death before the discovery was announced. Her grief is costume, not emotion. You see it now, no? The theatre already crumbles. Consider the psychology. What role does this person need to play? Lord Sinclair performed the perfect host, offering leather-bound chairs and Cuban cigars, yet his fingers trembled when he touched the rim of the dead woman's glass. Miss Penelope played the loyal friend, comforting Arabella with crisp linen handkerchiefs, yet her gaze slid away whenever the body was mentioned. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon. Dr. Hart examined the corpse with cool efficiency, his breath carrying the faint bitterness of medicine. "Cyanide is swift," he stated. Poirot noted the doctor's gloves remained spotless, no trace of the cold marble floor where Lady Violet had fallen. "Ah, but you say, Poirot reads too much into small gestures? Bear with me." Arabella clutched her fiancé's sleeve, silk rustling softly, while rain began tapping the tall windows. Julian Fairfax poured rich continental coffee for the shaken ladies, his smile never faltering. A man who has just witnessed violent death rarely smiles so easily. If you were hiding guilt, how would you perform innocence? The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 1:30. Wood smoke warmed the room, while the terrace outside lay cold and wet. Poirot drew himself up, still small, and addressed the assembled cast. "The stage is set. The actors had taken their places. Let the drama begin." Chapter 2. Enter the Players. The interviews began in the small library adjoining the drawing room, where leather-bound volumes released the faint scent of furniture wax and aged paper each time a shelf was touched. A single lamp cast warm light across the polished mahogany desk. Outside, rain continued to tap insistently against the tall windows. Hercule Poirot seated himself behind the desk with deliberate calm, arranging notepad, fountain pen, and a small crystal paperweight in perfect symmetry before inviting the first performer to enter. Lady Clarissa Sinclair arrived first, her midnight blue silk gown whispering against the thick carpet. She settled into the chair opposite Poirot, with the practised grace of a woman who had attended 1,000 such evenings. "My sister was fragile, Monsieur Poirot," she began, lowering her lashes and allowing her voice to tremble just sufficiently. "The season exhausted her. The endless smiling, the pressure, she must have chosen this way out." She dabbed at her eyes with a crisp linen napkin. The gesture was flawless, yet no moisture darkened the fabric. "The mask slips. Did you catch it?" Poirot regarded her quietly. "You saw her take the fatal glass?" he asked. Clarissa nodded at once. "Yes, alone by the sideboard. Yes, I thought nothing of it." Her hands remained perfectly still in her lap. Too still. Lord Edmund Sinclair entered next, cigar smoke still clinging to his rough tweed jacket. He stood rather than sat, as though the chair might compromise his authority. "I was on the terrace most of that quarter hour," he stated firmly, "discussing next month's races with young Fairfax. Cold out there, bracing." Yet when Poirot inquired about the precise time he re-entered the ballroom, Lord Edmund's gaze flicked toward the fire he had so recently left. His cheeks showed no trace of the chill he described. "You watch with Poirot, no? You see how this one's fingers tighten when the victim's name is spoken?" Miss Arabella Sinclair followed, still radiant in ivory silk, though now the roses pinned at her bodice seemed to droop, as she played the innocent debutante with heartbreaking sincerity. Wide eyes, soft voice, small hands clasped tightly. "Aunt Violet adored me," she whispered. "She would never, not on my night." Yet when Poirot gently asked whether she had noticed anyone refill her aunt's glass, Arabella's gaze darted once toward the empty doorway where her fiancé had stood earlier. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. Mr. Julian Fairfax strode in with easy confidence, sandalwood cologne arriving before him like an advance announcement. He offered a small bow and a reassuring smile. "Terrible business, sir. I found her myself. Slumped already, called for help at once." He described pouring champagne earlier in the evening. Always helpful, always attentive. Yet he never once mentioned the precise moment the bottle had been opened, nor why he alone had handled Lady Violet's final glass. Ask yourself, why does he avoid mentioning the exact sound of the cork? Miss Penelope Langley entered in a rustle of taffeta, playing the loyal friend to perfection. "I was in the powder room when it happened," she explained. "The music was so loud, the piano masked everything." She described the scent of lilies near the body with vivid detail, yet Poirot noted she had spoken of the chandelier tinkling at the precise instant the discovery was made, information only someone present in the salon could know. The careful observer, and you are becoming careful, mon ami, will notice how smoothly she wove that small fact into her tale. Dr. Sebastian Hart came last, leather medical bag in hand, performing the detached professional with cool precision. "Cyanide," he said simply. "He acts within seconds, painless, relatively." He tasted the word painless, as though sampling bitter medicine. Yet when Poirot asked whether he had touched the champagne bottle, the doctor's fingers drummed once, very lightly, against the edge of the desk. Consider the psychology. What role does this person need to play? Each account circled the same fatal 15 minutes. Each performance contained one small missed cue. Lady Clarissa's dry eyes, Lord Edmund's unchilled cheeks, Arabella's fleeting glance, Fairfax's omitted detail, Penelope's too precise recollection, Hart's restless fingers. Alibis overlapped, yet never quite locked together. Poirot adjusted his moustache thoughtfully. "Mesdames et messieurs," he said softly to the empty room after the last had departed, "you have each given Poirot your opening scene. Some lines rang true. Others, he made an expressive gesture with small hands. We shall see which actor forgets their lines first." Every actor had taken their mark, but who played truth? Chapter 3. The first act, Poirot, moved quietly through the now empty ballroom, as dawn light filtered pale and cold through the tall windows. The chandeliers had been extinguished. Only a single lamp burned on a side table, casting long shadows across the polished mahogany floor. The scent of dying roses and lilies hung heavy, undercut by the faint almond trace that still clung to the private salon doorway. He stepped inside the small room where Lady Violet had met her end. The velvet curtains remained half-drawn. The cold marble steps to the terrace glistened with last night's rain. A young housemaid, summoned at Poirot's request, stood nervously near the sideboard, as she twisted a crisp linen napkin between her fingers. "I saw them arguing, sir," she whispered. "Mr. Fairfax and Lady Violet. Not loud, just sharp words near the champagne." He smiled the whole time, but she looked frightened. Then he poured her glass himself, said something about one last toast to the happy couple. She drank it right after. "The mask slips. Did you catch it?" Poirot regarded the girl calmly. "You are certain it was Mr. Fairfax who filled that particular flute?" She nodded. "Yes, sir. He held the bottle with both hands, steady, like he'd practiced. No one else touched her glass after that." Poirot walked to the terrace doors. The chill night air had seeped inside. He could still feel it on the marble. He bent and examined the carpet near where the body had fallen. A single faint smudge, almost invisible, caught his eye. The print of a man's evening shoe, slightly damp from the terrace stones. Yet Julian Fairfax had insisted he never stepped outside after 11 o'clock. "Observe, mon ami. This performance of helpful fiancé begins to show strain. The careful observer will notice how the alibi of remaining in the ballroom does not match the evidence underfoot." Poirot straightened, smoothed an imaginary wrinkle from his sleeve, and returned to the main drawing-room where the others now waited uneasily. Lady Clarissa sat rigid, fresh coffee steaming before her. Lord Edmund stood at the fireplace, fingers drumming against the mantel. Arabella clung to Penelope's arm. Dr. Hart checked his watch once more. Poirot arranged 3 crystal glasses symmetrically on the low table before addressing them. "Last night, each of you gave Poirot a most interesting scene," he began, "but the first act, it reveals more than you perhaps intended." He turned to Julian Fairfax, who had entered last and now leaned casually against the doorframe. "Monsieur Fairfax, you performed the devoted fiancé with great charm. Yet a witness saw you pour Lady Violet's final glass. You spoke of a toast, and the carpet bears the mark of a shoe that crossed wet terrace stones. Your size, your tread." Fairfax's smile held, but a muscle twitched at the corner of his mouth. "I stepped out for air earlier, before everything happened. Nothing more. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth." Poirot made an expressive gesture with small hands. "The little grey cells, they do not accept coincidence so easily. You alone handled the champagne after Lady Violet expressed her intention to speak privately with Lord Sinclair after the first waltz. Only you knew she planned to reveal certain matters." The room grew still. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 8. Arabella gave a small gasp. Penelope's hand tightened on her friend's arm. Lord Edmund's cigar fell unheeded into the grate. "Consider the psychology. What role does this person need to play? The fiancé who must appear devoted, helpful, above suspicion, yet terrified that one conversation could destroy the glittering future he had so carefully rehearsed. You watch with Poirot, non? You see how his hands remain steady even now, too steady. A truly innocent man would show outrage, confusion, trembling. This one performs calm, because calm is the mask he has worn longest. The tension rises. Someone will break character soon." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. "The first act has concluded, mes amis. Some masks have already cracked. The spotlight moves closer. Who among you will be the next to forget their lines? The first mask cracked. More would follow. Chapter 4. Rehearsed Lines. By mid-morning, the drawing-room had grown oppressively warm from the newly lit fire. Wood smoke curled lazily toward the high ceiling, while the scent of strong continental coffee drifted from silver pots on the sideboard. The velvet curtains had been drawn back, yet the grey March light filtering through the rain-streaked windows did little to lift the chill that had settled over the assembled cast. Hercule Poirot stood near the fireplace, small hands clasped behind his back, watching each suspect with the calm attention of a director who already knows which actor will forget their lines first. He had summoned them individually once more, this time not for gentle questioning, but to test the scripts they had so carefully rehearsed. Lady Clarissa entered first. Her silk morning gown rustled softly as she seated herself. "I have told you everything, Monsieur Poirot," she said, voice pitched to convey dignified exhaustion. Violet was troubled. The will was no secret. She intended to leave the bulk to Arabella. Yet when Poirot quietly asked why she had not mentioned her sister's plan to confront Julian Fairfax about his secret marriage, Clarissa's fingers tightened on the arm of her chair. "I did not know the details," she replied. The pause before the answer was fractionally too long. "Observe, mon ami, this performance of the grieving sister begins to crack at the seams. Rehearsed lines falter when pressed on inconvenient truths." Lord Edmund followed, cigar already lit, smoke wreathing his head like a private curtain. "I was never near that damned champagne tray after 11, he insisted. "Terrace, Fairfax, horses, that's the whole of it." Poirot produced a small sketch, the footprint on the salon carpet, and placed it on the low table between them. "Yet this shoe, my lord, matches yours, and the terrace stones were wet at midnight." Lord Edmund's cigar hand trembled once. Ash fell unheeded onto the polished mahogany. Must have stepped in earlier, for air. The excuse sounded thinner than the smoke he exhaled. Too perfect, too rehearsed. Truth stumbles, lies flow smooth. Miss Arabella came next, pale in a simple wool day dress. No roses now. She sat with hands folded tightly in her lap. "I trusted him," she whispered when Poirot gently mentioned Julian's prior marriage. Aunt Violet would never have lied about something so cruel. Yet her eyes, usually so wide and innocent, avoided Poirot's gaze entirely. The careful observer will notice how her shoulders no longer shake with genuine distress, only with the strain of holding the performance together. Mr. Julian Fairfax arrived with forced nonchalance, sandalwood cologne sharp against the wood smoke. "You're grasping at shadows, sir," he said, offering a small, practised smile. "I poured champagne for dozens that night, one glass among many." Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Yet only one glass carried cyanide, and only one person knew Lady Violet intended to speak after the first waltz, because only you stood close enough to hear her whisper it to Lord Sinclair. Fairfax poured himself coffee from the silver pot. The cup rattled faintly against the saucer. His hand, so steady the night before, now betrayed him. But you say Poirot reads too much into small gestures. Bear with me. The body cannot rehearse tremor as convincingly as it can rehearse calm. Miss Penelope Langley entered in a brisk rustle of tweed, playing the loyal friend with renewed determination. "I burned nothing in that fireplace," she declared before Poirot could speak. "Someone is trying to cast me as villain." Yet when he produced the half-charred fragment of a letter found that morning by the housemaid, Penelope's colour drained. and the paper bore her own neat hand. If she tells him, everything ends. She stared at the singed edge, as though it might speak. I wrote it weeks ago. It means nothing. Consider the psychology. What role does this person need to play? The friend who must appear above suspicion, yet whose jealousy has simmered long enough to burn paper in secret. Dr. Sebastian Hart came last, medical bag at his side like a prop he could no longer trust. I examined the body professionally, he repeated. Cyanide, that is all. Poirot lifted a small brown bottle from the table, the same bitter medicine Hart carried in his bag. This tincture shares the faint almond note of prussic acid, Poirot observed mildly. A curious coincidence, no? Hart's fingers drummed once against the leather, then stilled. Many medicines smell faintly of almonds, he said, but the words lacked conviction. The grandfather clock chimed noon. Rain tapped insistently at the windows. Poirot arranged the 5 suspects' coffee cups in a perfect semicircle before him, each one touched by a different trembling hand. Rehearsed lines, mesdames et messieurs, he said softly, begin to falter under the spotlight. One of you directed that poisoned glass. One of you knew the precise moment Lady Violet would drink alone. One of you has forgotten that truth needs no rehearsal, while lies must be performed again and again until they crack. He made an expressive gesture with small hands. We approach the final act. The script is failing. Soon the curtain will rise on the true performer. Rehearsed lines began to falter. The script was failing. Chapter 5. The mask slips. The private salon had been restored to its former elegance, yet the air still carried the faint ghost of almond and dying roses. Late afternoon light slanted through the tall windows, catching motes of dust above the cold marble floor where Lady Violet had fallen. Hercule Poirot had requested that Mr. Julian Fairfax meet him here alone. No audience, no supporting players. Only the two of them on this small, intimate stage. Fairfax entered with his usual measured stride, sandalwood cologne arriving first like an advance warning. He offered the same practiced smile that had charmed every debutante in the room the night before. You wish to see me privately, Monsieur Poirot? I'm happy to assist, but though I fear I've already told you everything. Poirot stood near the sideboard where the fatal champagne bottle still rested, now empty and innocent-looking in daylight. He arranged 2 crystal flutes symmetrically before speaking. Monsieur Fairfax, you have performed the role of perfect fiancé with admirable consistency, helpful, attentive, devoted. Yet every performance, no matter how brilliant, contains one moment when the actor forgets his lines. Fairfax's smile held. I'm afraid I don't follow. Poirot lifted a small folded sheet of notepaper from his pocket, the final letter Lady Violet had begun but never posted. The ink was still fresh enough to smell faintly of violet scent. He unfolded it slowly. My dear Edmund, Poirot read in his precise voice, before the first waltz ends, I intend to speak with you privately. Mr. Fairfax has concealed a prior marriage in Scotland. The proof is in my possession. This cannot stand if Arabella is to— He paused. The sentence remains unfinished. She never completed it because someone ensured she never would. Fairfax's posture remained relaxed, yet his fingers curled very slightly at his sides. Lady Violet was unwell, delusional perhaps. Grief does strange things. Grief? Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. But you knew of this letter before anyone else, no? You stood beside her when she whispered to Lord Sinclair that she wished a private word after the waltz. You refilled her glass immediately afterward. And you, only you, knew the precise moment she planned to destroy your carefully rehearsed future. The young man laughed once, short, controlled. This is absurd. I loved Arabella. I would never— Love, Poirot interrupted gently, can wear many masks. Sometimes it performs as devotion, sometimes as obsession, sometimes as fear of losing what has been so carefully acquired. He stepped closer, green eyes gleaming. Observe your hands, monsieur. They tremble now. Last night they were steady while you poured poison. Today they betray you because the spotlight burns hotter. The mask slips. Did you catch it yourself? Fairfax's smile fractured. You have no proof. I have the psychology, Poirot replied. A truly innocent man, confronted with such accusation, would show outrage, loud, immediate, perhaps even physical. You perform calm because calm is the costume you have worn longest, but calm cracks under sustained light. He gestured toward the terrace doors. Step outside for a moment. Feel the cold air you claimed to seek earlier. Then return and tell me again how innocent your hands remained. Fairfax hesitated. Only a heartbeat, yet it was enough. He crossed to the doors, pushed them open. Chill March wind rushed in, carrying the scent of wet stone and distant wood smoke. When he turned back, his face had changed. The practiced charm had thinned to something raw and desperate. She was going to ruin everything, he whispered. The words came without rehearsal, without polish. Arabella, everything we planned, the title, the estate, the season, it would all vanish. Violet knew. She wouldn't listen to reason. His voice cracked on the final word. Real feeling flooded the room at last. Not the polished grief of the night before, but panic, naked and ugly. His shoulders slumped, the confident posture dissolved. He reached for the sideboard as though to steady himself, then recoiled as though the wood burned. Poirot regarded him without triumph, only quiet satisfaction. The mask has fallen. Beneath it, the true face at last. Fairfax sank into the nearest chair, hands covering his face. No more performance, no more lines, only the small broken sounds of a man who had forgotten how to pretend. You see it now, non? The theatre crumbles when pressure strips away the script. The crucial insight is simple. Only the murderer would have known the exact timing of Lady Violet's intended revelation, because only the murderer stood close enough to hear her whisper it, then acted in the few seconds the music allowed. The tension that had coiled through every scene finally snapped. Outside, rain began again, and tapping softly against the glass like polite applause at the end of a flawed performance. Poirot made an expressive gesture with small hands. The curtain does not fall yet, monsieur, but your role in this drama, it is finished. The mask had fallen. The true face emerged. Chapter 6. Behind the curtain. The late afternoon light had faded to a soft grey when Hercule Poirot requested the household staff open the small upstairs sitting room that Lady Violet had used as her private retreat. The room smelled of expensive Worth perfume lingering on silk cushions, mingled with the faint wood smoke from a fire that had burned low the previous evening. Velvet drapes framed the single tall window overlooking the wet garden. Polished mahogany shelves held leather-bound photograph albums, and a crystal decanter still half full of sweet liqueur. Poirot moved methodically, small hands arranging objects with precision. A silver frame here, a half-read letter there. He had already known the broad strokes. Julian Fairfax was the hand that poured the poison. But the why, the deeper connections, those lay behind the curtain. And every good theatre has a backstage where the real motives wait. He began with the photograph albums. One volume, bound in soft kid leather, opened to reveal Lady Violet at 30, radiant, laughing beside a much younger Clarissa. The sisters had been close once, the smiles genuine. Yet page after page showed the gradual separation. Clarissa's wedding to Edmund, Violet's solitary travels, the slow drift into widowhood and resentment. A single loose photograph slipped free. Clarissa and a handsome young man, not Edmund, standing arm in arm beneath an oak tree, and the back bore a date in Violet's neat hand, 1919. The man's face was familiar. Poirot tilted his egg-shaped head. Julian Fairfax's father. Observe, mon ami, this is no mere coincidence. The mask of sisterly affection had hidden a deeper wound. Clarissa had once loved the elder Fairfax. Violet had known and perhaps disapproved. When Clarissa married Edmund instead, the resentment simmered for decades, disguised as loyalty. And when Clarissa's daughter chose the son of that same man, the old wound reopened. Poirot set the album aside and moved to the escritoire. A locked drawer yielded to a small key found beneath a porcelain figurine. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. One, dated 3 months earlier, was from Dr. Sebastian Hart. My dearest Violet, our time together meant more than you allow yourself to admit. If you ever need me, truly need me, I remain yours. The tone was tender, yet the signature was formal. An affair ended bitterly. Hart had continued to attend the family as physician, performing professional calm while nursing private hurt. Yet his steady hands the night before proved he had not acted on that hurt. Another letter, half burned at the edges, bore Penelope Langley's hand. If she tells him everything ends, burn this. Penelope's jealousy had not been invented for the evening's drama. It had festered quietly. She had loved Arabella in her own fierce way, perhaps more than friendship allowed, and feared losing her to Julian. The half-charred page was proof she had tried to destroy evidence of her own scheming, yet she had not poisoned the glass. Fear, not murder, had driven her to the fireplace, and Lord Edmund's secrets emerged from a small safe behind a painting. Gambling markers, thousands of pounds owed to discreet Mayfair clubs, each one stamped paid by VH. Violet had covered his debts for years, quietly, without public scandal. The last note, dated a fortnight earlier, read simply, "No more, the purse closes." Edmund's mask of the bluff, dependable husband had concealed desperation. Yet desperation alone does not explain the precise knowledge of the timing, the steady pour of poison into a single glass. Poirot closed the safe and stood before the window, watching rain trace slow paths down the glass. Behind every curtain, a secret. Behind every secret, a motive. Clarissa's old wound, Penelope's possessive love, Edmund's financial terror, Hart's wounded pride, all genuine, all powerful. Yet none had stood beside Lady Violet at the critical moment. None had whispered one last toast while the orchestra played. Only Julian had known the exact instant she planned to speak. Only Julian had handled her glass after that whisper. The others performed their private dramas in the wings. He had stepped forward to deliver the fatal line. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully. The psychology was clear now. Julian had not killed from hatred, but from terror of exposure. The glittering future, title, estate, position in society, had rested on one conversation that Violet intended to have. He had rehearsed helpfulness so long that murder became merely another necessary performance. The grandfather clock in the hall below chimed 6. Footsteps sounded on the stairs, soft, hesitant. Arabella appeared in the doorway, the ivory day dress replaced by simple wool, eyes red from genuine tears at last. "Monsieur Poirot, is it truly him?" Poirot turned, green eyes gentle. "Oui, mademoiselle. The leading player has been revealed. The others, they wore masks of their own making, but none directed the final scene." Arabella nodded slowly. "I thought I knew him. I thought I knew everyone." "Humans wear masks because truth is costly," Poirot said softly. "But the stage cannot hold illusion forever. Eventually, the curtain must part." He made an expressive gesture toward the rain-streaked window. "Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Yet only one secret carried the weight of cyanide." The room fell quiet, save for the soft crackle of the dying fire and the persistent tap of rain. The backstage had been exposed, the actors' private dramas laid bare, and now only the final act remained. Behind every curtain, a secret. Every secret, a motive. Chapter 7. The Final Act. The ballroom of Sinclair Mansion had been cleared of every trace of the previous night's revelry. The crystal chandeliers still hung overhead, but now only a few were lit, casting a soft, focused glow across the polished mahogany floor. Velvet curtains had been drawn halfway, muting the late evening rain that tapped against the tall windows. A single long table stood in the center of the room, surrounded by 8 high-backed chairs. On the table rested one empty champagne flute, the very one Lady Violet had held in her gloved hand. Hercule Poirot waited until the last footstep faded in the corridor before he spoke. The cast had assembled once more. Lady Clarissa Sinclair, Lord Edmund, Arabella, a Julian Fairfax, flanked discreetly by 2 plainclothes officers, Penelope Langley, Dr. Sebastian Hart, and the housemaid who had witnessed the final toast. They stood or sat in uneasy silence, each face illuminated by the spotlight of truth. Poirot stepped forward, small but commanding, his green eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. He made an expressive gesture with precise hands, as though drawing an invisible curtain aside. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, voice clear and measured, "you have each performed for Poirot throughout this long evening and this longer day. Some performances were truthful, some not. Now the house lights dim. The final act begins. Let us review the roles you have played." He turned first to Lady Clarissa. "You, madame, played the grieving sister with impeccable technique. The dry-eyed weeping, at the trembling shoulders, the crisp linen napkin applied at precisely the correct moments. Magnifique. Yet grief that is rehearsed leaves no moisture on the handkerchief, no ruin to the mascara. You knew of your sister's death before the footman cried out. You had already prepared your performance." Clarissa's lips parted, but no sound came. Poirot moved to Lord Edmund. "You, my lord, performed the bluff, dependable host. Terrace alibis, cigar smoke, talk of horses. Yet the footprint on wet carpet betrayed you, and the gambling debts your sister paid until she refused. Those too were part of your script. You played worry convincingly, but never murder." Lord Edmund stared at the floor, cigar forgotten between his fingers. Poirot's gaze settled on Arabella. "Mademoiselle, you played the innocent debutante. Wide eyes, soft voice, roses pinned to your heart. Yet innocence does not glance away when the fatal glass is mentioned. You suspected nothing of the poison, but you suspected your fiancé's heart long before tonight." Arabella gave a small, broken nod, tears at last genuine. "Miss Langley," Poirot continued, "you performed the loyal friend with fierce determination. The burned letter in the fireplace, the too precise recollection of the chandelier's tinkle. You tried to protect Arabella from what you feared most, losing her to a man who did not deserve her. Jealousy wore the mask of friendship, but it never held the cyanide. Penelope's shoulders sagged. She reached for Arabella's hand and found it this time. "Dr. Hart," Poirot said gently, "you played the detached professional perfectly. Steady hands, bitter medicine on the breath, clinical words. Your affair with Lady Violet had ended in bitterness, yet your gloves remained spotless, your pulse calm. You mourned her privately, but you did not kill her." Hart inclined his head once, a gesture of quiet relief. Poirot turned at last to Julian Fairfax, who stood rigid, the confident smile long gone. The officers flanked him closely now. "And so we come to our leading performer," Poirot said softly. "Monsieur Fairfax, you gave the most convincing performance of all. The charming fiancé, the helpful pourer of champagne, the shocked discoverer of tragedy. Outrage when accused, calm when questioned, steady hands when all around you trembled. Magnifique, bravo! Yet you made one fatal error. One small moment when the mask slipped irrevocably." He lifted the empty champagne flute and set it down again with deliberate care. Lady Violet whispered to Lord Sinclair that she would speak with him after the first waltz. Only one person stood close enough to hear those words. Only one person immediately refilled her glass and offered the toast. Only one person knew the precise timing of her intended revelation, the revelation that would destroy the glittering future you had rehearsed so carefully. Title, estate, position, Arabella herself. Fairfax's jaw tightened. "You have no—" "I have the psychology," Poirot interrupted. "A truly innocent man, accused before this assembled cast, would explode with protest, would demand proof, would show the tremor of outrage. You performed calm because calm had become your longest worn costume. But calm cracks under unrelenting light. Your hands tremble now, not from cold, but from the weight of truth." He stepped closer, a voice dropping to a near whisper that carried to every corner of the room. "You poured the cyanide while the orchestra masked the tiny sound. You chose the moment when music and laughter would cover any gasp. You played helpfulness so perfectly that no one questioned why her glass alone was touched by your hand after that whisper. But the body cannot rehearse forever. The little grey cells saw what the performance hid. Terror dressed as devotion, greed masked as love. Fairfax's knees buckled slightly. One officer steadied him. "The performance is over," Poirot concluded. "The curtain falls. The truth takes her bow." Silence followed. Deep, final, broken only by the soft crackle of the fire in the distant grate and the persistent rain against the windows. Poirot drew himself up to his full, still modest height. "The final act has concluded. Only truth survives the curtain call." The final act concluded. Only truth survived the curtain call. Chapter 8. Curtain Call. The ballroom lights had been dimmed to a gentle amber glow. The chandeliers no longer tinkled. The only sound was the soft crackle of the fire in the grate and the steady patter of rain against the tall windows. The velvet curtains hung motionless, framing the long table where the empty champagne flute still stood like a silent prop left behind after the final scene. Julian Fairfax had been led away quietly through the servants' corridor, wrists discreetly secured, his once confident stride reduced to a slow shuffle between the two officers. No dramatic protest, no final flourish of denial, only the dull click of handcuffs and the closing of a distant door, and the performance that had held the stage for so long was over. The leading man had exited without applause. Lady Clarissa Sinclair remained seated at the far end of the table, her silk gown now creased and forgotten. For the first time that night, her shoulders no longer shook with rehearsed grief. She stared at the crystal flute as though seeing it clearly for the first time. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, almost conversational. "I knew she was going to speak to Edmund," she said. "I knew about the prior marriage. Violet told me weeks ago. I begged her not to ruin Arabella's happiness." A small, bitter laugh escaped her. "I thought silence would protect us. Instead, it protected him." She lifted her eyes to Poirot. No tears now. Only the raw honesty of a woman whose mask had been stripped away entirely. "I performed grief because I felt it, but not for the reason anyone thought. I grieved what my sister might do to my daughter, and I grieved what I had already lost years ago." She touched the place on her finger where a wedding ring had once been, then let her hand fall. "The theatre is finished for me, Monsieur Poirot. No more roles." Lord Edmund stood near the fireplace, rough tweed jacket unbuttoned, cigar long extinguished. He looked smaller somehow, the bluff authority drained away. "The debts were real," he said quietly. "Violet paid them because she pitied me. When she stopped, I panicked, but I never—" He broke off, glancing at the empty doorway through which Fairfax had disappeared. "I never thought it would come to this." He turned to Arabella, who sat beside her mother. Ivory silk replaced by a simple wool travelling coat. "I should have told you everything. The gambling, the pressure, the way your aunt held the purse strings. I let pride wear the mask of strength. It was a poor performance." Arabella reached out and placed her hand over his. No words passed between them, only the small, genuine pressure of fingers against fingers. The role of the innocent debutante had fallen away. What remained was a young woman learning painfully how to stand without illusion. Penelope Langley hovered near the velvet curtains, taffeta evening dress exchanged for a plain tweed coat that smelled faintly of rain and London streets. She had not spoken since the revelation. Now she stepped forward, awkward, unscripted. "I burned the letter because I was afraid," she admitted. "Afraid Arabella would choose him over everything, over me. I thought if no one knew, but jealousy makes fools of us all." She looked at Arabella with eyes that no longer hid anything. "I'm sorry. I played the loyal friend so hard I forgot what friendship actually requires." Arabella rose and crossed the short distance between them. She embraced Penelope without hesitation. "We both wore masks," she whispered. "Yours was protection. Mine was blindness. We start again, without them." Dr. Sebastian Hart stood apart, leather medical bag at his feet like an anchor he no longer needed. He had removed his gloves. His hands, so steady through every examination, now rested open at his sides. "I loved her once," he said simply. "Violet, long after she stopped loving me. I stayed close as her physician because proximity was all I had left, but I never harmed her. I only watched her destroy herself with secrets." He looked at Poirot. "You saw through the calm. Thank you for that." Poirot inclined his head. "The calm was genuine, Doctor. Only the motive was he hidden. Truth does not always require tremor." The grandfather clock in the hall beyond chimed 9. The rain had eased to a gentle drizzle. One by one the cast began to disperse, not with dramatic exits, but with quiet, human steps. Clarissa helped Arabella into her coat. Edmund offered Penelope his arm. Hart picked up his bag and walked toward the front door without looking back. Poirot remained in the centre of the ballroom, small figure dwarfed by the vast space, yet somehow filling it. He arranged the single champagne flute in perfect alignment with the edge of the table, then stepped back. No one clapped, no curtain rose for bows, and there was only the soft closing of doors, the fading echo of footsteps on parquet, the gradual return of silence to a house that had, for one night, become a theatre of death. Lady Clarissa paused at the threshold and looked back. "Will you stay for coffee, Monsieur Poirot? The real kind, not the performance." Poirot smiled faintly. "Another time, madame. Tonight the stage requires rest." She nodded once, understanding, and left. The fire crackled once more, then settled. The rain whispered against the glass. Justice had arrived, not with fanfare, but with the quiet finality of a performance ended. No applause for this performance, only justice. The curtain call came. No applause, only justice. Chapter 9. After the show weeks had passed since the night the ballroom lights dimmed on Julian Fairfax's final exit, and the Sinclair mansion stood quiet now, its grand doors closed to society, its once glittering season replaced by the simple rhythm of ordinary days. The hothouse roses in the conservatory had been replaced with hardy spring tulips. Their scent was lighter, less theatrical. The velvet curtains had been taken down for cleaning, letting pale sunlight flood rooms that had so recently served as stage and courtroom. Lady Clarissa Sinclair had left London for the family's small estate in Kent. She no longer wore silk evening gowns. Instead, she favoured soft tweed skirts and sensible walking shoes that smelled faintly of damp earth and wood smoke. The drawing-room there was modest, polished oak instead of mahogany, a single grandfather clock instead of crystal chandeliers. She spent mornings in the garden, hands in soil, planting what would bloom without fanfare. Grief no longer needed rehearsal. It had become quiet acceptance. She wrote to Arabella twice a week, short letters filled with ordinary news. The first lambs, the new rose cuttings, the way the fire crackled on cool evenings. No masks remained between mother and daughter. Lord Edmund had sold the London house. The proceeds, after the last of the gambling debts were settled, purchased a modest property nearer the coast. He no longer smoked Cuban cigars. He kept a single pipe for evenings beside the sea. The bluff host had given way to a quieter man who walked the shingle beach each morning, hands in pockets, listening to waves instead of society gossip. He visited Clarissa often now, not as husband performing duty, but as companion sharing silence. They spoke little of the past. What needed saying had already been said in the ballroom that final night. Pride had been stripped away. What remained was something simpler, more honest. Arabella Sinclair had not returned to the season. The ivory silk gown hung untouched in a wardrobe at her mother's house. Instead, she had taken a small flat in Bloomsbury, near the British Museum, and enrolled in evening classes in art history. Her days were filled with books, sketches, and the soft rustle of turning pages rather than silk. She wore simple wool dresses now, her hair pinned plainly, no roses at her bodice. The innocence she once performed had become something deeper, earned through pain rather than rehearsed for applause. She met Penelope Langley for tea every Saturday at a small cafe near the museum. They sat at the same window table each time, he ordering strong continental coffee and sweet pastries. No more taffeta, no more tweed disguising jealousy, only two women learning how to be friends without scripts. Penelope had found work as a secretary in a small publishing house. Her nimble fingers now typed manuscripts instead of burning letters. She laughed more easily these days, genuine laughter, not the careful performance of loyalty. When Arabella spoke of Julian, Penelope listened without interruption, without the old possessive tightening of her hand. The mask of the fierce protector had fallen away. What remained was steadier, kinder. Dr. Sebastian Hart continued his practice, but he had moved his consulting rooms to a quieter street in Harley Street. The leather medical bag still accompanied him, yet he carried it more lightly now, as he no longer tasted bitter medicine on his own breath. The almond note no longer haunted his thoughts. He had begun to write a small monograph on the psychological effects of chronic grief. The dedication read simply, "To V, who taught me more than she knew." He sent a copy to Poirot with a brief note. The calm was genuine. The truth set it free. The Sinclair mansion itself had been let to a diplomatic family from Paris. The new tenants filled the ballroom once more, not with debutantes and champagne, but with quiet dinners and chamber music. The private salon where Lady Violet had died was now a morning room. Sunlight poured across the cold marble floor, warming it. The champagne flute had been washed, polished, and placed in a cabinet with the rest of the crystal. No one spoke of cyanide there any more. Arabella visited the house once, on a bright April afternoon. She walked through the empty ballroom, footsteps soft on parquet that had once echoed with waltzes and revelations. She stood before the tall windows, watching rain that had long since stopped, remembering the tap-tap-tap that had underscored every tense scene. She touched the velvet drapes, newly rehung, smelling faintly of fresh dye, and felt no tremor of fear. The theatre had emptied. Only memories remained. Gentler now, she left a single note on the mantelpiece for the new tenants. "The house holds no ghosts, only lessons." Then she closed the door softly behind her. Outside, London moved on. The season continued without the Sinclairs. New debutantes, new gowns, new champagne corks popping under the same chandeliers. Yet something subtle had shifted in those circles that remembered. Masks were worn more lightly now. Eyes searched more carefully for the tremor beneath the smile, the dry handkerchief in rehearsed grief. Poirot, reading the society pages over his morning tisane, noted the small transformations with quiet satisfaction. Arabella sketching in Bloomsbury, Clarissa gardening in Kent, Edmund walking the shore, Penelope typing pages, Hart writing truth instead of prescribing calm. All of them stripped of roles they no longer needed to play. The theatre had emptied. The lessons lingered, small, persistent, like the scent of lilies that sometimes drifted through an open window on warm spring days, reminding those who had once performed there that truth requires no rehearsal, only courage. The theatre emptied. The lessons remained. Chapter 10. Poirot reviews the performance. In his small, orderly apartment near Green Park, Hercule Poirot sat in the deep armchair beside the fire. A cup of tisane steamed gently on the low table, its herbal scent mingling with the rich aroma of continental coffee he had enjoyed earlier. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked with comforting precision. Outside, the March rain of 1937 had long since given way to the soft patter of an early spring evening in 2026. No, wait, the mind wanders. It is still 1937 in this memory, the year the curtain fell on that glittering tragedy. Poirot smiled faintly at his own small slip. Time, like performance, plays tricks when one reflects too long. He had arranged the evening newspaper symmetrically beside the cup, though he had already read the relevant paragraphs. Arabella Sinclair now studied quietly in Bloomsbury, her sketches praised in small circles. Lady Clarissa tended roses in Kent, with hands no longer gloved for effect. Lord Edmund walked coastal paths alone, but content. Penelope Langley typed manuscripts with steady fingers. Dr. Hart's monograph on grief had found modest readers among his colleagues. Julian Fairfax awaited trial in a cell that smelled of nothing theatrical, only damp stone and regret. Poirot touched his magnificent moustache thoughtfully and leaned back, letting the fire warmth ease the faint chill that always lingered after such cases. Why, he wondered, as he so often did, do people perform rather than reveal truth? The question was old, yet it never grew stale. Society demands the mask. The grieving widow must weep becomingly at a debutante ball. The loyal friend must hover protectively. The fiancé must pour champagne with charming steadiness. I remove the mask and one stands naked before judgment. Social, financial, emotional. So the actor rehearses. The dry-eyed sob, the steady hand, the helpful smile. Yet the body cannot rehearse as perfectly as the face. Guilt betrays itself in the tremor that arrives too late, the glance that avoids the very object it helped destroy, the calm that holds too long when outrage should erupt. In this little drama at Sinclair Mansion, every performer had worn a mask fashioned by fear or greed or love, twisted into possession. Clarissa masked old romantic wounds as sisterly concern. Edmund masked ruinous debts as bluff confidence. Penelope masked jealous obsession as friendship. Hart masked lingering heartbreak as professional detachment. Julian Fairfax masked terror of exposure as perfect devotion. Each believed the role would protect them. Each discovered too late that truth requires no rehearsal, while lies demand constant performance until exhaustion sets in. Poirot recalled another case, the Ackroyd affair, with particular clarity tonight. There, too, the murderer had performed neighbourly shock with astonishing skill. He hosted dinner the very night after the crime, poured wine with a hand so steady it might have belonged to a statue, discussed the weather as though nothing had changed. Poirot himself had sat at that table, momentarily deceived by the widening eyes, the dropped jaw, the perfectly timed gasp. Yet, when the man thought no one watched, his fingers had tightened on the stem of his glass until the crystal cracked. A truly innocent man does not shatter fine stemware while smiling, and the little grey cells had noted that grip, the silent confession the face refused to make. So, it was with Fairfax. He poured poison with the same steady hand he later used to offer brandy to shaken ladies. He smiled when others trembled. But when the spotlight of confrontation burned hottest, when Poirot placed the unfinished letter before him and spoke of the whispered intention after the first waltz, his mask finally splintered. The tremor came then, not from cold or fatigue, but from the unbearable weight of truth pressing against a performance stretched too thin. The psychology of revelation is mercilessly simple. Truth waits patiently in the wings. It does not shout, it merely exists. The actor grows tired, the lines falter, the body forgets its cues. A dry handkerchief, a too steady hand, a smile at the wrong moment. These are not accidents. They are the unguarded gestures when the curtain sways, and the audience glimpses what lies behind. Society forces masks upon us all. The debutante must appear innocent, the widow must mourn elegantly, the friend must protect without possessing. Yet every mask eventually exhausts its wearer. Guilt manifests in the small betrayal, the finger that drums once too often, the gaze that slides away from the body it helped create, the calm that cracks into panic when pressure becomes unrelenting. Why does truth ultimately triumph over performance? Because truth needs no applause. It simply is. The actor craves the curtain call, the bow, the illusion of success. Truth requires only one honest moment, and in that moment the theatre collapses. Poirot triumphs not because he is cleverer than the criminal, but because he watches for the stumble. He waits for the instant the rehearsed line gives way to the raw, unscripted truth. He lifted the tisane, sipped once, felt the warmth spread through him. The fire crackled softly. The clock chimed the hour with gentle finality. Outside, London moved through its own endless performance. New balls, new secrets, new masks waiting to be worn and eventually discarded. Poirot set the cup down with precision. "Until the next theatre of crime, mes amis," he murmured to the empty room. "Poirot will be watching always." The fire settled lower. The rain whispered against the window. The lessons of one small, glittering tragedy lingered in the quiet, patient as truth itself.